gonna rank the albums now. Elliott doesn't exactly suit this format because he's such a consistent songwriter that one valid means of ranking the albums would just be by the number of tracks they have. Just a very reliable machine. There's thereby not that much to describe on the individual albums, but let's see what I can do. Archivists have recently been able to uncover, assemble, and publish his first 6 albums with his high school band. It's still good, occasionally great music. There's actually clues to upcoming Elliott Smith songs in them. Interestingly, some bits written by someone else in the band that he later used in his own song without giving credit, but apparently there's no bad blood at all. And even if you deleted all of those tracks, he'd still count as a singular talent. I'm gonna file that as something for the Juliet Naked level fans to get to. Though that's the level of fan you ought to and will soon be. Consider these a grab bag. Kinda psychedelic, kinda teenage, but with the elaborate lyricism Elliott later made his own. 80s indie, it's not all Elliott, it's occasionally dodgy, but just as often wondrous in its own way. The talent on display is uncontainable, his piano parts. All 6 show that brilliance, but it's peppered among the silliness, indulgence, and youth. They quickly move from unserious ditties through prog pick and mix, jangle, Jangle Unchained, Costello impressions, and hard rock. I think I'm ranking them like this, just so you know. But then before I get to Smith's solo, there's another band. Heatmiser starts out a lot more hardcore, somewhere near hair metal, but with the trademark chugging palm mutes and throaty vocals of Fugazi. Is that trademark infringement? This first one rocks, but not in a way that's ever important. Competent and generic, vocals kinda lacking, Elliott isn't recognizable. The EP goes more punky and engaging, with Elliott now showing up on vocals. He's not at home there, it's brief, but still a better set than the first one. The second album is a more interesting, more of the same, as the music softens up a bit and Elliott steps forward, but his thin voice is still out of place in these songs that might have worked better in the solo career he was speeding ahead with. Neil Gust's vocals are better now, but his songs aren't as good. One Last album is where it comes closest. Elliott's solo had already really taken flight by now, which gives his band self a challenge to match up to, but also a question mark regarding why to bother. Having more fun and variety, the band's improved vastly, but not enough to justify staying as a band and keeping Elliott tethered. Flanked by tracks he'd take solo, you hear Heatmiser disappear into redundancy, even as they reach their best. Note the number of tracks he didn't have reason to take solo. It's funny to hear this band improve in a straight line as their music becomes less skilled, less intricate, playing things they obviously could have done from the wilder start, but didn't yet have the sensibility. Elliott addressed this band with something close to embarrassment, and that's an overreaction, but there's nothing here that quite enriches or compares to his solo discography. Between Heatmiser albums, Elliott started pitching his solo career. It's the way that this solo career started, the nearly accidental promotion of private 4-track recordings, that's just the miracle at hand in this whole story. Well, that and his talent. It's incredibly quiet and gentle acoustic guitar stuff with very rapid fingerpicking. I think Elliott's reputation promotes him as a very sentimental and intimate songwriter writing about his own feelings. But just as much as that, probably more than that, he's a storyteller. I've not counted up exactly what first-person versus third-person songs there are, but he's got this verbose, maximalist stream of consciousness approach to lyric writing. He was just unstoppable as a songwriter, I believe. Anywhere he went, he was still writing songs. They poured out of him. And this is the first big speaker as a solo act, it's very much at the quiet end, very private, just whispered voice and guitar, recorded at a level as if it's scared to wake anyone up. But that brought something so unique to music at the time, and he's just so damn good at it. However, this collection is slight. There's just less of it, so it's going lower down. Across the career, you can track a straight diagonal on a graph of his songs getting louder, more confident, more extroverted, more layers, more instruments. And at one end of that, it's very pretty because there's just so much satisfying detail going on. And at the other end, the early end, it's so pretty because it's so bleak and spacious. However, some songs in that format stay on the albums as he goes.
To call it minimalism for its few layers misses out on how melodically maximal his guitar work can be, often a constant musical motion. Embellishment can be great, but sometimes what's underneath is already really detailed.
The first step up that diagonal is still very quiet, with his whispered vocals in that doubled technique that is just his absolute signature. But what can I say? It's bad to come to the question, what can I say on this show? Just, there's more songs that he bothered to title, there's better songs. If this is concept, this is proof of concept. And now another one with a bit more going on in it, and the songs that are on this one just happen to be a set of his very best, which, yeah, is difficult to measure. But if we had to boil his work down to a playlist, a single CD best of, you'd find that quite a lot of it would be on this disc.
Either or shows a music that's ready to have hits, now comfortable in itself and more inviting.
Posthumous compilation of some unreleased bits from around the time. In recording chronology, it goes here, and selecting his songs for the albums compared to what gets relatively binned. These are all of a similar quality to his album tracks, and there just happens to be a whole lot more of them, 24 tracks on a 2-disc set. And when the quality is so reliable, you have to factor in the quantity. Still, I'll admit it doesn't beat this one.
Watch him write a gorgeous song many other songwriters have never matched up to and then not publish it in his lifetime and not even bother to title it. But you're used to that by now. That shrugging off of his own brilliance is just definitive of how natural it was to him. When it was time for titles, he was already on the next idea.
Then, oops, another album where a lot of the content is worthy of a best of. Maybe that describes everything from here on out. So he's now reached a full band sound on most, but crucially not all of it. Arguably that undermines his unique characteristic as a musician, but as the career went on, it was the right move. It was the way to do something different, and it's more engaging.
Demos unambiguously demonstrate that this direction in his music was natural to him.
I imagine his literally solo live shows would have had a lot of just absolute quiet from the audience, and singing along would be completely disparaged because he's all about the sound in the quiet. So it's good to see his career come to a new avenue, an anthemic one. He definitely loved the Beatles, and in the same way that they went from simple pop to ornate pop, he's gone from his simple singer-songwriter acoustic stuff to very ornate versions. Though it was never really musically simple, his instincts as a composer, especially as a guitarist, but you can also hear it on piano, it's just ridiculous. And yeah, this still has the quiet end and some studio experimentation. There's an a cappella song with multiple layers of Elliott's. In ranking the albums, I have to reward that diversity. And it continues. I have run out of new things to say. This is just further up the line, more ornate, more anthemic, more extroverted and confident, more poppy, but no shame to that. A lot of tracks.
Along the way, Elliott is honing a kind of wobbly yet strident rock music, maybe post-rock through its psyche idiosyncrasies.
As much as his label was just juicing his songwriting out of him, he'd never ran dry. It's understandable to want to get another great slice of genius out of the genius. mentioned how 2004 was about the time that I tuned into great music as a child. That's also true in this career, but it was particularly awkward as he was dead by then. This is the first Elliott Smith album I had, and for quite a while it was definitive to me of his work, and it is individually great. A lot of this end product is how he wanted it to be, to my understanding.
And it's a great, dense but delicate rock sound, woozy and crunchy.
That's how far up the line we are now. But again, it's a good thing. Maybe even some of these tracks could have been stadium rock if he'd lived to perform at the stadiums. Stadiums.
It's understood that Elliott intended a double album here, and maybe that could have been a mistake, baggy and overwhelming, against which this result tests very well. All the ambitious perks of a double album without the drag. I've called my bias into question for this decision, and I know I'm placing it higher than somewhat, but man, the songs, he was still killing it.
And then one more posthumous release. There was a documentary I've not yet seen for which a soundtrack of largely unheard recordings was gathered. There's 20 tracks that cover like 20 years of his life from teenagehood to death. With track titles such as Untitled Guitar Fingerpicking, it sounds like we've reached the bottom of the barrel, but you have to realize this barrel is more just a plate for the biggest pizza ever. You can dig out his hushed teenage recordings and find that the genius of him was there all along. Maybe it's not quite fair to put this one in the rank. This is the one that you should get to last, although you then get to all the teenage band stuff I mentioned.
Graded directly on its content, this might go up a couple of notches, but given that a lot of the material is presented in a more finished or newly finished form on the proper albums, never mind.
For a shortish life, there's so much great work. Do get around to this and you'll see how songs such as Unknown Song Instrumental stack up very well against the rest of it. With these tracks having been gathered for the sake of the documentary, there's more instrumentals and things that like demonstrate where he was at the time. But musically, there's no compromise.
If you're not already amazed at his repertoire, congratulations on getting to gain that experience.